Hi, everyone. I am Alex Fitton, and welcome to the Adoptive Mom Podcast Thursday live show. And today I'm mixing things up a little bit. I got a notification off to the side that distracted me. But tonight I'm going to be giving away 2 prizes. And the more you comment and ask questions, the more chances you have to win. So definitely be doing that. I'm going to be talking more about the prizes here in just a minute. But I wanted to tee this up. So I'm going to be answering some adoption questions from the website Quora, which I just learned about. And it's super cool. If you guys have not checked it out, you should totally do that at Quora.com. It's Quora. And then that way it'll start us off, and then I can transition into some questions that you guys have about adoption in general, about our adoption, about the podcast, about adoption nonprofits, whatever you got for me, I can answer. Even if it's a personal question, I'm fine with that. I'm a pretty open book. But let's jump in. And like I said, in just a few minutes, I'll start talking about the prizes I'm giving away. So the first question was, should you tell your adopted child that he or she is adopted? And my answer is yes, obviously. And I'm going to follow that up with, I don't even think it should be something you have to tell them. I kind of feel like they should just always know. And that the follow-up question to that later on, someone asked, what is the best age? And that's my point. I know so many families that are starting to, I know that was kind of the old school way to do things, is to have a sit down conversation with your kid when they're like 8 or 9 or something and talk to them about being adopted. And I know that a lot of kids struggle with that, that's a huge identity crisis for them. And the families that I know, including ours, where the kid just always knows that they're adopted. And it's always something that you talk about and celebrate their, gotcha or forever day, whatever you call it, that they function better because their identity is secure. They know that they're wanted, and they know that adoption is not a weird topic, or it's not something to be ashamed of. But comment and let me know what you think of that answer. If you have a different belief, I want to hear about it. Let's start a discussion on it. Sorry, I just got a comment, but they were just commenting to get the chat bot update, which is super fun. And that'll be sent out in Messenger. So the next question was, instead of an abortion, why don't women have the child and give it up for adoption? And that's an incredibly complicated question. And it's not something that I am in any way an expert on. But since I work with a lot of adoption nonprofits, and I learned a lot from having birth moms on the podcast and from hosting a birth mom brunch this past weekend for National Birth Mother's Day, I'm learning that a lot of times a lot of times it's because of shame, and a lot of that's on us as adoptive moms. And so if the question is, instead of abortion, why don't women have the child and give it up for adoption? I mean, that's incredibly painful. And when we as adoptive parents are afraid of birth moms, or we teach our kids to be ashamed of them, or something like that, then we are shaming those women into just cutting out that process. And of course, that's a pretty simple answer, but it's definitely one of the more important ones. And it's something that we as adoptive moms and as an adoptive community can firsthand help with and fix, is by just reducing the shame and the stigma surrounding being a birth mom. And I know that open adoptions are becoming a little bit more common, and I think that will help too. And just trusting in God's sovereignty for our kids, that if we have an open adoption, or if we allow our children's birth parents into their lives, that not everything's going to crumble and break because we're not in control of it. Again, I want to ask you guys, what do you think? Do you agree or disagree? Do you have other reasons why a woman would choose an abortion over an adoption? Or I don't know, just comment. Again, let's start a discussion. And I want to remind everyone, if you guys have questions, the more you comment, the more chances you have to win some prizes. So join the discussion, ask me questions, whatever you want to do. I'm going to take a sip of my coffee really quick. Okay. Next question was, are there any downsides to adoption? And again, that's kind of a complicated question, but absolutely, there are downsides to adoption. There are downsides to parenting your biological children. And that's a pretty vague answer. But if we're specifically talking about downsides to just adoption, yeah, there are definitely, I mean, there's incredible trauma that comes with adopting, especially older kids and babies as well as if they had a traumatic birth or just when there's always going to be separation and distance between um, what your children understand about themselves because of who you as an adoptive parent, family is, and who, what they got from their birth family. And that's going to be a struggle. And we know that adopting older kids, we definitely sustain secondary trauma. Um, Sorry, I get so distracted by the little moving things on my screen. I apologize for that. But yeah, I mean, that secondary trauma, that's definitely a downside. Like, that sucks. It's no fun. There's lots of attachment issues that are downsides. And I think that part of the problem is that when we go into adoption, we don't have any clue what to expect. And there's part of that that you just can't understand. It's kind of like having a biological child. Um, you can't in any way be prepared for how you're going to feel about that child until it happens. You just can't. It's a kind of love that you don't even know exists. And when you adopt, it's the same thing. It's there's no way to prepare yourself on one hand, but on the other hand, I think that we as an adoptive community can help better prepare new adoptive parents to what they're going to go through, because I think that the distance Carol Barsky says this in episode 4 of the podcast of season 1 of the podcast, that the distance between expectation and reality is misery. And I think she actually got that quote from someone else. So I don't want to unfairly misquote, but isn't that so true that I mean, that's a big downside in and of itself that I'm not going to say could be avoided altogether, but could definitely be lessened by just having different expectations or having fewer expectations. Because I think that when we don't understand what we're getting into and then we're completely knocked off our feet by what happens, it's definitely I don't know, it throws you for a loop, and it starts the ball rolling on that secondary trauma. Okay, I had a question. Nate says, was there a certain moment, age, or event that led you toward adoption? I actually, that's a great question. I don't remember when. I think I just always knew I wanted to adopt. And in college, that really grew, but there wasn't anything. I mean, my family didn't adopt. I didn't really know anyone that was adopted. So I guess that's kind of a boring answer, but no. I just always knew. And then when me and my husband started dating, I told him on like the second date, I was like, "Oh, by the way, I kind of plan on adopting. Hope that's cool with you." And he was totally cool with it. And so we just kept on rolling with that. We got started a lot, I think, earlier than we had expected to, because my biggest fear was that we had these dreams and aspirations of adopting, but like many people who have dreams and aspirations of adopting, they say that and then it just never happens. It never seems like the right time, or they feel like they aren't financially stable enough, or they're busy or something. I mean, there are a lot of excuses, and some of them are valid and some of them, I'll just be honest, are not valid. But I think that was me, and I can't speak for Brian, but I assume one of his biggest fears was that we would just never get around to it. And so we jumped on it before we even had biological children, and we didn't adopt until after we had our oldest biological child, but we were already in the process and had the paperwork filled out and all of that stuff while I was pregnant, actually. So, but that's a great question. Thank you, Nate. Okay, I'm going to take a second to talk about our prizes for tonight. It's kind of the same prize. So the first prize I'll give away is a copy of Shane Shower's new album, It's Not Over. And if you don't know Shane Shower, he is a worship leader at Cross Church in Fayetteville, and he just made his first album. And I really just think I don't know how he couldn't take off. He's an adoptive dad. They struggled with infertility for like 4 years, and then they adopted 2 older boys. And this album is just, it's kind of the starts of his memoir of just learning to love these kids and learning about adoption and to face this pain and not make everything pretty, and but to deal with the pain and to trust God with it. And so I'm so excited. I think this could be an amazing resource for adoptive families. And I have 2 copies to give away, one a physical copy and one is a digital copy. So I'll be giving away 2 of those. And like I said, the more you comment, the more entries you get to win. But I had another question. So what is the biggest misconception or myth about adoption that you encounter? That's a hard, I mean, it's a good question, but it's a hard question. I think that one of the biggest ones that affects me, and I really can't speak for a lot of other people, but I think especially with our teenager, people think that we are saints and that everything is super awesome. And I think even before we adopted, we definitely had misconceptions about how we would be dealing with a lot of hard behaviors, but we would not be dealing with a lot of like deep trauma and hurt and hardship, because we had no basis for that. We had no understanding of that. Both of us were raised in fairly loving households. My husband had a little bit of struggles when he was a teenager, but besides that, we didn't understand what we would really be facing. And so that really was hard for us, because I think a lot of people look at us and they assume the same thing, that, sure, he might have hard behaviors, but we're so amazing because we've done this great thing. And that almost makes us feel worse, because it's a struggle. It's hard. And, um, I think that when people look at us and they make comments about how everything must be so much fun, or he must help a lot with the kids, or, just little stuff like that, it's not that they are doing anything wrong, but it's like a little, nick. It reminds us that we're not doing so hot and that we struggle and that we completely underestimated what we were getting into. And I don't mean that in a way that we regret it or we wouldn't do it again, but that's part of why I started the podcast, is that I don't know, I wanted to prevent that from happening to anyone else. As Amy Butler said, which if you haven't listened to Amy's episode, it was a season 1, episode 5 or 6, pretty early on. I can't remember, but it's amazing. And it totally is all about gracing adoptive parents. But she summed it up and she said, you got your butt kicked and you don't want that to happen to anyone else. She didn't say but for the sake of this Facebook Live, I will use nicer language. But if the camera was not rolling, I would probably use the real word. But anyway, but it's totally true. I hate for that to happen to anyone else. And I want everyone to do what we did / are doing, but I want them to do it with better eyes for the situation, if that makes any sense. So I know that was a long answer to your question, Sarah, but it was a super good question. And Arden says, adoption rocks, and so do you. Thank you. I think you rock as well. Okay. So I'm going to roll with another one of my Quora questions. And like I said, I will, oh, nope. Somebody asked, any funny or weird adoption comments from strangers in public? Example, we've had someone say, are you all a normal family or foster family? That's pretty funny. I mean, it's a fair question. It's a fair question, but I don't know. Brian, have we had any weird comments or questions? Nope, he doesn't want to be. My husband is a photographer and he's very uncomfortable with being on the other side of the camera, which is so weird. But I think that it's a lot of people, I can just see the confusion on their face, but I'm a pretty open book. And so I try to save people from that, not embarrassment. I don't want to say it's embarrassing to ask questions, but I think a lot of people are afraid to ask questions. And we have, with our 3 littles, we have essentially triplets, and the 2 youngest, we call them our twins. They're only 5.5 months apart. And so it's funny because when I say their ages, people just give me a really weird look and they try to figure it out. And usually I save them and I'm just like, this one's adopted. And they're like, oh, okay, we were wondering. But yeah, are those all yours? I get a lot of that. And plus especially when I'm with Clark, people get really confused because I'm only 11 years older than Clark. And so people assume that we're siblings, or that I'm a lot older than I am, or that I'm a babysitter or something. I haven't had anyone ask me if I was his girlfriend or something, which I'm very thankful for because that would be really weird. So yeah, thanks, Abby. That's a good one though. I think it's funny that that someone asked you if you were a normal family. So I wanted to remind everyone that's new or that just jumped on of our prizes tonight. For the more you comment, the more you ask questions, the more entries you have to win one of 2 copies I'm giving away tonight of Shane Shower's new album, It's Not Over. And I won't give you the whole little bio that I gave a few minutes ago, but just so you guys know, he's an adoptive dad and he wrote this album from a place of pain and struggle and hope and just all of those emotions. And I love that he doesn't shy away from talking about those and addressing them. So I'm so excited, but stay until the end of this. I'll announce the winner at the end. Okay. So, and keep asking questions. This is really fun for me. I really like talking about adoption if you guys didn't know. Let's see here. This question is kind of hard. Do you ever regret adopting your child? And I think that regret is such a tricky word because I'm a person that I know a lot of people say I don't believe in regrets or no, hashtag no regrets. And I am a person that has consistently, I do believe in regrets. I think that there are lots of moments in my life that I regret and wish I had done differently. And I think that that's fine. I think that regret is an emotion and I'm learning to not just deny emotions, to face them and talk about them and think about them and turn them over in my hands. And then move on and figure things out. I think that when we are afraid of our emotions, when we're afraid of regret, when we have thoughts about, wow, this is really scary, or that scary, that thought seems too scary for me to walk towards, then we bury that and that always will come back to light. So do you ever regret adopting your child? Do you ever regret adopting your child? I think, yeah. I mean, there are lots of times. There are times I won't say I regret parenting, but I think that there are always hard times where we can say, what have we gotten ourselves into? And that doesn't mean that we necessarily do anything about it. It just means that we're admitting to feelings and feelings aren't wrong. Yeah. Sorry, I was reviewing which of these were just entry comments and which were questions. So yes, but we love Shane Shower and his new album. Okay. How would you advise people who want to adopt in theory, but are put off by the huge financial burden? I would say that a couple of things. So first of all, adoption through foster care is free. Like they'll even cover the cost of your CPR certification. They'll like reimburse you the $35 or whatever for it. And 2, a lot of the fees for private adoption, depending on which agency you use, are over time. So it's not like, okay, now you need to write us a check for $30,000. I'm not saying all of them are like that. Some of them might ask you to write a check for $30,000, but a lot of them, it's a monthly or it's as needed or it's legal fees, that come in the form of bills or something like that. But yeah, I would definitely say if you're not in a financial situation where you can pay any kind of $1,000 payment or hundreds of dollar payment, then I would definitely say go through the foster care system. Especially, I mean, you're going to receive board payments, and I would never, let me say this loudly for the people in the back, I would never advocate for getting into foster care to make money because you won't be making money. You spend that money on your kid. But for much of the first however long, it depends on which state you live in Arkansas, you have to have a child in your home for 6 months before you can legally adopt them, and that's like a trial period, which is totally healthy and wise on DCFS's part. And for that time period, you'll receive a board payment for your child, so technically your child is free for that time. And in a lot of cases, especially if it's an older child, you can get continued services. We got continued services with both of our kids, so they got to continue being on Medicaid, and they get to continue getting board payments. And so that's a super good financial thing. Now, international adoption is just always going to be expensive. So sorry. But yes, thank you for the question, Arden. That's a good one. All right. Keep on commenting, guys. Don't forget, I'm giving away 2 copies at the end of this Facebook Live, and it's going to be awesome. Oh, there it is. Shane Shower, It's Not Over. Shane, if you're watching, by the way, you should totally comment and say anything you want to about your album. I hope. Oh, you did. Much love to the adoptive community. Woohoo! I hope I'm doing an okay job of plugging your album. It's awesome, and I would certainly not want to shortchange it in any way. So, but yeah, I was just saying, I don't know how long you've been watching, but I was just saying that you wrote this from a place of, struggling with infertility and then adopting some older kids and the trauma that comes with that, and that you have not shut down that pain and you have not shut down that struggle, but you've talked about it and faced it and turned it over to God. And I think that is so beautiful. So I'm so excited to share your album with the adoptive community. I think it'll be so healing for anyone who gets the chance to listen to it. Okay. What advice can you give or resources? What advice can you give or resources to adoptive parents use to help grandparents understand RAD? That is an amazing question. RAD is so tricky, and it's not like a one size fits all thing. There's no medication that you can give to treat RAD. And I'm actually planning on doing an entire episode just on RAD for season 3, which will, season 2 hasn't even ended yet, but season 3 is going to launch in the fall. And so it's just so tricky. I think that first of all, I did a grandparent episode back in season 1. It was with Andrea McCurdy, who's also my mom. But we did talk about RAD. We talked about just the struggles of walking into a situation where you didn't understand what was at stake, because we didn't understand. And so them having to go, my parents specifically having to go through the process of educating themselves and understanding that what they were seeing wasn't necessarily what was happening in our home. And there's actually a great there's a great resource that I found and I shared on a different Facebook Live. So I'll share it later. I'll link to it in this thread after it's over, but it is so great. And I was reading it just like, yep. So what I'm feeling, because it talks about how moms specifically, but adoptive parents in general, just feel like they're going crazy. They feel like they must be crazy because no one else sees it. No one understands it. They think they're being heartless. They think that they are being unfair, or that they're not up to the job or whatever. And you just feel like a piece of crap as a parent of a RAD kid. And I am with you. I feel you. I love you. I am so sorry that you're going through that. But yes, I would encourage you to have them listen to that episode and be on the lookout for an episode in season 3. I actually had someone request it, and that is amazing. I love it when people request episodes. So yeah, I will share that resource later, but thank you. That's a great question. Okay. Abby says, how is your view of adoption now different than when you were starting and training before you had kids in the home? I definitely think that we had, like I said earlier, a pie in the sky view. I think that we were, like most of our world, we were very behavior focused and not heart focused. And I'm not going to feel ashamed about that necessarily, because we didn't know. And I think most people don't know. They focus on the behavior. And because when you're a kid, and Abby, I know that you are a biological child of an adoptive family. So you maybe understand trauma a lot better than most other people, but you've never sustained trauma and, with a 2-parent home, and you were older when you started adopting. So it's always been a part of your world, but you always had an understanding of it. And that's how most of us live. Even if we lived in a single parent household or divorced parent household or something like that, we still had that love. We still didn't sustain that trauma of neglect or abuse. And that's the majority of our culture in the US. So it's really hard to wrap our heads around the fact that much of the behavior that we're seeing stems from something deep, deep down that only therapy and Jesus can fix, honestly. So yeah, I think that's the biggest difference that we've had. And we're honestly still really getting through that. That's something that we are still healing from, because we spent way too long running in circles trying to chase behavior issues and not addressing heart issues. So that's a great question. Is just who's commented? Oh, okay. Gotcha. Like I said earlier, my producer is off to the side and he refuses to show his face to the camera. I think it's because he's wearing sweatpants and he's embarrassed. Oh, okay. Am I done? Oh, okay. Well, I have a couple more questions. I'm sorry for the logistics planning on live Facebook. Can't really say live TV, but oh, Shane said, nailed it. If you've ever walked through a journey that felt lonely or know someone who has, these songs are written for you. Hope you enjoy. Thanks, Fittens. Peace emoji, peace emoji. So thank you, Shane. Okay, I'm going to get to a couple more questions. I'm going to read one from here. And then if you have questions, go ahead and ask them. There's still chances to up your entries for our prizes. So let me see here. Where was I? You know what? Okay, I had a few and I was trying to decide which one or two that I wanted to do. So I think that this is another really good question. Have you ever, or can you ever love your adopted child as much as you love a bio child? And again, I think that's really complicated, because something that we've learned is that it's a spectrum. It's not, I don't think there are like levels to love, and that's another misconception that I have. So another answer to your question, Abby, is I think that in my mind, I thought that the love explosion I felt when I had my biological children would just replicate for my adopted children. And when it didn't, I thought I was doing something wrong. And it took me a long time to heal from that. And so, as much is, like I said, it's a weird term because it's different. And it's different depending on the age. It's different depending on their trauma. It's different depending on your connection with them. There are so many different factors that go into love. And again, I'm going to refer back to Amy Butler's episode back in season 1, because we talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how all 5 of those are love, but we don't feel like it's love until we get to the heart connection, those types of needs, as opposed to meeting needs that our children didn't have for so long, and how that is love too. It just doesn't feel the same to us. And that's another big thing, is that we learn that it's not about us. Even though we don't want to deny those feelings, we don't want to push them down. It definitely feels very much about us in the moment, because we can only be responsible for our own feelings. So I liked that question, because I think that so many people like us, like me, I'll speak for myself, felt like I was doing something wrong because I didn't feel a certain way. Okay, yeah, keep commenting questions. I'm going to do one more from here, and then if I don't get another question, I'll announce winners. Woohoo! What is it like to adopt a teenager? So I know I've been talking a lot about this. Let me back up. I know I've been talking a lot about these types of feelings that all go into our experience of adopting a teenager. And if there was one thing that I wish I could tell 3 years ago, Alex, it'd be that you're not gonna parent him, and he's not going to be like a kid to you. And I think that some people have different experiences, so I can really only speak for mine, but I know a lot of other people who have similar situations when they adopt a teenager, is that your role with them is more of a mentor. It's more of a supporter. It's more of a launching pad. And it's way less of a like, you're my kid and I care for you the same way I would care for a kid who came to me younger. I mean, he was 14 when he came to us. He had already had a whole 14 years of experiences before we even met him. And so for us to come in and be like, we're your parents now. And we didn't actually say that to him, but I think that that was our attitude. I think that that was my expectation. And I was like, okay, when do we get to the part where it feels like we're his parents? And that never happened, obviously. But I think that managing our expectations could have really helped with that. But adopting a teenager, it's great in so many ways. You don't have to potty train them. You don't have to like spoon feed them. So that's really cool. They can generally take care of themselves. I mean, we adopted a boy, so reminders of showering and stuff are the same as any teenager. We got introed to that really early. But I think that covers kind of the basics. If anyone has any follow-up questions to adopting a teenager, I am always happy to answer those. Whitney says, what is something you wish that non-adoptive parents knew about supporting adoptive families? I think that I'm going to say a list of things. So number 1, believe us. And this goes back to the RAD question. When we say that we're struggling with something or that we're going through something, even if you don't see the evidence of it with your eyeballs, it doesn't mean it's not true. So believe us. And don't just think we're being dramatic or not handling things the way that we should or whatever, because you know what? We probably aren't handling things the way that we should. We just aren't. I know that we've made a lot of mistakes, and I have had to apologize to our teenager multiple times. Number two, I think that so many people don't ask, or I'm sorry, so many people ask what they can do or if we need help. And so many of us are really bad at asking for help or admitting that we need help. And I don't even think it's a pride thing. I think it's just that we don't want to be a burden. We already feel like a burden. And one of the biggest struggles that we face is that, it's almost been 3 years since we got our first placement and we still need help. And we feel like our time is over. Like we should be okay now, or that people are over it, or it's not exciting anymore. But, and I'm not saying to do this for us necessarily, but just like go and drop off coffee, go take a meal, go offer to babysit. That's a big one. Just do things without asking, because so few people are going to be like, oh my gosh, yes, I really do need help. Yeah, I think that, I don't know. Would you agree that that's probably a good, yeah. So believe us and just help. Don't ask first. And that we're not saints. I think that's a big one. And I'm not trying to like toot my own horn here. I just mean that we definitely don't feel like saints. We feel like really crappy, overwhelmed, exhausted people. And sometimes when people say that we're awesome and great, it makes us feel worse. And that is not to make anyone feel bad who has said those things, because we know that it comes from a place of love and admiration even, but sometimes just listen. So that, I hope that answers your question. I am going to go ahead and announce winners. Is this all still accurate, you think? Or so should I do like the top two? Okay. So the first prize, which is a hard copy of Shane Shower's album, It's Not Over, goes to Sarah Perkins. Woohoo! And if you don't know, Sarah was actually on the podcast like a few weeks ago. And so she adopted a little girl from India who was born without one of her eyeballs. And that's a super fun story. And so you should definitely go listen to that. But congratulations, Sarah. The second winner, which will win a digital copy, is Arden Baltzell. And that's handy because you don't live here. So it's great that you get a digital copy. But you had the most comments. So thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you to Arden and Sarah for being our winners. And thank you to Shane for donating the copies of his album. I really hope you guys enjoy them because it is awesome. So thank you guys for tuning in. Let me know if you liked this. I really like answering questions. It's fun. And I have a whole slew of them from Quora, which is great. I love that website. And so, yeah, let me know if you enjoyed this and if I should do this more. I have this live show every Thursday at 8:30, pretty much every Thursday. I usually announce if I'm not going to do it. And I usually just talk about adoption topics. And so if you have a topic that you want me to cover, or if you have a question that could turn into like a whole, episode of the Thursday show, then let me know in the comments or reach out in a message. But thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I hope you have a great night.